Good evening, everybody. It's now I'm on the East Coast. It's 8:01 p.m., which could mean only one thing. It's time for yet another episode of The Yard. What number is this? Does anybody know?
26.
Oh my, that's the way I figure. That's about half a year's worth, right?
Yeah,
Well,
give or take.
thanks for everybody for joining us again on Zoom. While we're on Zoom, we also are being watched on Facebook Live, on Twitter, on YouTube, and Instagram Live as well. And soon, as I have mentioned in the past, we're going to be seen by hundreds of thousands of our brothers and sisters in prison that have access to tablets, and they will be carrying our platform. They'll be able to watch episodes of The Yard. They'll be able to look at our job board as well as lots of other content. And what we're really excited about, they're going to have the opportunity to sort of enter a contest whereby they can submit lyrics. We're starting with hip hop music, but we will be expanding it to country music and gospel music and Latin music and folk music and heavy metal. And we'll probably be doing one genre a month, working with a record company. In this case, we're working with Meek Mill, who is a very prominent hip hop star and a prominent advocate in the criminal justice space as well, and his record label, Rock Nation, which is Jay-Z. And not only will folks have the opportunity to submit lyrics that Meek Mill is eager to choose from among them and to use them in upcoming songs for an upcoming album, but also the record company is very eager to discover new talent for them to sign for their label, both people who are currently incarcerated as well as our friends who have been released. So we'll be talking more about that. That should be happening in a couple of weeks. We have these tablets, I think they're in 420 or so different jails and prisons around the country. And they all operate very independently, as many of us know how the criminal justice system works. So it means that whatever happens, has to happen one by one. Luckily, we're not the ones administering this, but it's a fairly gargantuan effort. In any event, I could go on and on about this stuff because it's really exciting, but I'd be remiss if I didn't immediately introduce my two dear friends, teammates, and co-hosts tonight. As we normally can expect, we have got number one, the NBA All-Star and potential, I know there is talk about him being voted into the Hall of Fame. He played center for the LA Lakers, one of the tallest, nicest guys you'll ever meet. We have the big man, Seth Sundberg. Hey, Seth.
Hey, Richard, it's just getting more and more like boisterous. It's just like, how far can we push this?
It's just starting to get rude, huh?
Crazy.
I am really incrementally,
I see.
my goal is to elevate you to sainthood before I'm done. So just buckle up.
He's almost there.
It's almost there. And someone who may already be there, of course, is our very, very dear friend, who is a noted hip hop artist himself, as well as a famous entrepreneur. Of course, I can only be talking about the very fabulous Divine. Hey, D.
So, dude.
Good night, Richard. Good night. How is it going?
Good night. You already leaving us? That's it?
It's a good night.
Oh, it is a good night. It is. And of course, we're joined by the very wonderful Adrian Hatter, who sort of organizes things behind the scenes. A couple of things. First of all, as I mentioned, I am suffering from a terrible cold and cough. And I am just counting the minutes before I just break into a terrible coughing jag. If you see me just sort of pass out or fall off my chair or whatever, you'll understand why. It's nothing more or less than a bad cold. Also, for those of you who have the remotest interest, last week I actually moved. I lived in LA, and now I am a resident of my old haunts in Miami. So I'm back to Miami, the scene of the crime, as it were for me, where I got into all kinds of trouble, but also had a lot of fun. And I am here. So as you're passing through Miami, as many of you I'm sure will, just give me some advance notice, and maybe we can all connect for a cup of coffee or go surfing or something. I don't know. Last week, we had a great guest planned, Tragedy Gaddafi, who is a very, very well-known, very well-respected hip hop artist who really, you know, when they talk about OG, he was an OG. And he was behind a lot of great music that came, you know, through him and out of him. And he was supposed to be here, and something apparently happened, and it caused a delay, and we had to sort of cancel last week. He ended up showing up, and there were a few people who had stuck around, but we're really sorry that that happened, and we're sorry for the inconvenience and perhaps the lack of professionalism. I don't know. You know, it's live what we do, and you know, this stuff happens, and I'm sure we'll be able to get him back. But again, we're sorry if that put anybody out, because we really so do value your taking the time to join us. So in any event, please accept our apologies. Um, let's see. Um, I'm going to move a little bit quicker here than I normally do, because as you may know, I could just go on and on. We're here, we are in the yard like we've been 25 times before. And as I say, you know, our goal here is ultimately to connect people, to humanize people. That's the goal of our app, Commissary Club, which we would love if you would download and check out and tell us what you think. We're very excited about that. We think a lot of people who have records are also great role models and, in fact, inspirational. And I think you'll agree that our guest tonight falls within that category. Um, this is a guy, and I'll get into it, but you know, he did the time, but he never did the crime, which is about the most gruesome irony that you're going to want to find. But we want to sort of connect you to what the in-prison experience is, which is not the same for everybody by any means. Everybody has a different experience. They have different time. They're serving at different facilities, et cetera, et cetera. You know, so one size doesn't fit all at all. Like we normally do, we invite you and urge you, if you have questions or comments, please, you know, use the chat feature, but please try to keep your focus on the in-prison experience initially. We're going to talk with our guest at the end about the work he's doing now, because it's so important. But, you know, throughout the next hour and a half, try to focus on in prison if you can. So we do this same thing every time, and I'm going to ask everybody once again to do it. If everybody could just sort of shut their eyes for a moment, and shut your eyes, please, and just take a deep breath and hold it for a couple of seconds and just let it out slowly. Keep your eyes closed and just sort of let a little space enter your head and let your imagination sort of go wherever it may go. I try to paint a picture, you know, every episode about how prison and criminal justice is rarely about morality, but rather a case of often a good person who maybe made a bad decision, often when they were young in life, and sometimes a good person who never made a bad decision and yet still got him or herself in trouble somehow. But here's a scenario that I know has played out many, many times. And let's make believe, you got a kid, and some people here do. Let's make believe your kid's in college. It's your daughter. And your daughter has been your pride and joy from the day that she was born. She's so bright. She's so inquisitive. She's so kind. She always has a smile on her face for everyone. And not only that, she's crushing it in college. She's really smart. She's at the top of her class. Of course, now she's starting to talk about graduate school. And she would be the first person in your family to ever go to graduate school. So it's hard to imagine you having any more pride in your very dear daughter. She's going to school in California. There's a lot of good schools there. In California, as many of you know, they've decriminalized marijuana, as they have in 26 other states, incidentally. And she has plans to meet up with some friends over the Christmas vacation. They're going to meet up in Idaho and have a big ski weekend. There's great skiing in Idaho, and they're going to be coming in from all over the country. They rented a chalet, and she couldn't be more excited. Um, Idaho is not one of the 27 states that have decriminalized marijuana. They haven't done anything at all along those lines. But for your daughter, like most kids her age, smoking weed is not really that big of a deal. It's probably not that big of a deal for most of us at this stage. So, they're going to be partying. So, she's in California where you can go to a store and, buy it with impunity, high quality. She buys an ounce of pot she's going to take with her on her trip. And she doesn't really give it much thought. So you can imagine her surprise. She lands at the airport in Idaho, and she gets her bags, and all of a sudden there's this pot sniffing dog at the airport that has picked her out of the crowd. And all of a sudden things just go crazy. Everything is a blur. In short order, they've taken her to this windowless holding area. And she is, of course, very, very upset and very frightened. She admits, of course, that the pot is hers. Now, you get her a good lawyer. That's the least you're going to do. But the assistant district attorney who's overseeing her case is a very ambitious guy. And he has his eye on becoming and running for the state attorney general job. So it's very, very, very important to him that he be seen as being tough on crime, particularly when it comes to nice, privileged, affluent, out-of-state white college kids. This is someone that, needs to be taught a lesson. And as a result, your daughter, who's never done anything wrong in her life until now, she gets a 2-year prison sentence. She's not a bad person. She's not a violent criminal. She's not a career criminal. She's just a kid who made a stupid mistake. That's her crime. Of course, you go visit her the minute you can, but your heart is broken the moment you see her. You can't grab her and hug her and take her in your arms. You can't promise things are going to be okay. First of all, they won't let you get that close to her. And second of all, you know full well things aren't going to be okay. She had plans to go to medical school, maybe. Well, forget about that. She'd be a lawyer? No chance for that. As a matter of fact, chances are she won't be even allowed back in college where she is currently. And she'll never have the chance to pursue a good career. Now she's in prison, and that's a life of hell. She's young, she's picked on by the older inmates. The guards love to see her cry, so they are constantly at her. She's lost a lot of weight. She's not sleeping. She has these deep gray bags hanging from her eyes. You can't help but wonder, is she going to make it for the next 2 years? But there's one thing in prison, there's just one thing that she lives for every day. The one good time during the day is when they let her and everybody else out onto the yard. And then she can catch a glimpse of the snow-capped mountains that she was supposed to be skiing on. And she can connect with a couple of the friends that she's made. Maybe, just maybe, for that 1 hour a day, she can make believe that she still has the rest of her life to look forward to. That, in fact, all these wonderful things still await her, even though she knows they're not. So that despite the food and despite the poor medical service and despite the drab uniform she's wearing, for that one brief hour in the yard, she was once again your little girl that lighted up your life whenever you thought of her. These are the people who are in our prisons. These are the people who are out on the yard, and that's where we're going right now. So please, everybody, open your eyes and join me again this week on the yard. And let's meet our guest. His name is Jeffrey Deskovic. We call him Jeff. Jeff's from upstate New York and New York City. When Jeff was 17, he was in high school. He knew a girl, and this poor girl was found raped and murdered, a 16-year-old girl he knew. Jeff is the sort of person who wants to help and wants to get involved. And when he learned about this awful, awful tragedy, he wanted to help, and which the police thought was very, very odd. And they thought it was so odd that he was also so emotionally distraught and caught up in this case, but it clearly upset him greatly. And as a result of all that, the prosecutors were convinced he must be the guy who committed the crime. And they had him all day. They didn't feed him. They had him, questioning him with a bright light in his face. And somehow or another, he must have said something suggesting that he had something to do with this. So based upon that, they indicted him, and he was convicted at a jury trial for murder and for rape. He tried, his lawyers tried for years to have the case reopened because there was DNA evidence that would prove his innocence, but the government would not listen to it. They wouldn't accept it until finally they did. And in 2006, after I think 16 or 17 years,
16
years in maximum security, as a kid who was 17, 18, 19, 20, where that was his age when he did his time. Finally, they overturned his case and they let him out of prison. And he joins us here tonight. Jeff spends his time fighting for criminal justice reform through his own foundation. We're going to hear about that later. But first, Jeff, welcome to the yard. Thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome, Jeff. Thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks, sir. Thanks for having me. Minor thing. I was just 16 when I was arrested, and then I turned 17 before the trial started, which I lost, as you pointed out. So I was in prison from age 17 to 32, and the victim was 15 years old. So just wanted to reference those minor things. But yeah,
okay,
you
thank
got
you
the spirit of everything correct. Sure.
It's almost unthinkable what you went through. We were talking before the yard began, and to be that young going to where they sent you is unthinkably awful. But to be that young, sent to the worst places imaginable, and also to be innocent, I can't even conceive what that must have been like. So is there any way that you can sort of share with us what was that like?
Yeah, sure. Of course. Yes, there is. One way of putting it would be describing it as a nonstop obstacle course featuring the guards, civilians, and other prisoners, all as obstacles to the main goal, which was to overturn the conviction and regain my freedom. It was very violent in prison. In Elmira, where I spent most of my time, there were 3 or 4 stabbings or cuttings every day. There was plenty of violence that did not involve weapons, and there was a lot of gang activity. I had a bullseye on my back. So, because I was there for a rape with a murder, which there's a vigilante mentality, or people convicted of sex offenses. So I always had that on the back of my mind, that people would discover what I was incarcerated for, and that would motivate them to assault me. I mean, I'm in a maximum security prison. I mean, I'm not some tough guy. I'm not defeating any full-grown man. That's just not gonna happen.
Right.
But then there's also the psychological aspect of that. It took a long time to get used to the cell bars. Just being in the prison wall, I had to keep fighting off feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, thoughts of giving up, suicidal ideation as well. And maybe a third or half the time I was there, I couldn't quite even believe that I actually was in prison. I mean, the odds of any one of the factors going wrong that culminated into this result of this wrongful imprisonment, the odds of any one of them seemed to be, kind of astronomical, much less for all of them to have happened in tandem, culminating into that result.
Okay, so let's I want to set the stage here. You had your trial
Mhm.
and you were found guilty.
Yes.
And were you sentenced right then and there? Did you come back for your sentencing?
Came back for the sentencing.
Okay, and then when your sentencing was rendered, did they then take you away, or did you have a chance to kind of get yourself together?
No, no. As soon as I was convicted, the bail was I lost. They put me back in custody as soon as I was found. As soon as I was found guilty. And just a quick other side note that I want to mention on the sentencing. I just want to share that I begged the judge to overturn the verdict because I was innocent, and I referenced the DNA to support my contention because semen found in the body didn't match me. And the judge said to me on the record, he said, "Maybe you are innocent." But instead of him overturning the conviction, which he could have done by reversing any number of rulings he made against me in the course of the trial, he instead took the easy way out of giving me the 15 to life sentence.
Okay, so you're sentenced, and um, now it's time. Was Elmira the first prison that you were sent to?
Yeah, first was the reception center,
I
so that's
understand.
where but after the reception center, that was the first prison. Yes, you are
Okay,
correct.
so I want to get a feeling from you of what those earliest moments were like. You're in a bus, a van of some
Yes,
sort, I
I'm in a,
imagine, and you're
I'm in a
shackled,
bus.
you got handcuffed and you're shackled and the whole nine yards, right? And
Yes, right.
you're looking at the window and you're pulling up to this facility, an old prison, like, Gothic, uh, in Elmira, the middle of nowhere. What, what was going through your mind as you were pulling up to the prison? Do you remember?
Yeah, I do. I remembered how large the prison wall loomed and how menacing the barbed wire appeared. And frankly, I was terrified.
Yeah, with good
Yeah,
reason.
so
So they pull up, they open up the door, they lead you out. Do you remember that moment, like when you sort of made that symbolic first step into the prison, like shit, here we go?
yeah, I do. I do remember that was what I was thinking. And this one poignant memory really comes to mind shortly thereafter. So the guards asked me, well, do you want to go into protective custody? And I said, well, what's that? All right. And they quickly explained, well, that would be that for your own safety, because we really can't protect you, you would just sign a paper asking to go there, and that way nothing would happen to you. And I said, yeah, well, what would that look like on a day-to-day? Well, that you would be kept in your cell 23 hours a day, and you wouldn't get to go to recreation other than by yourself for like an hour. There's no education, and you'd be basically be in your cell all day. And in my mind, I thought, well, this whole thing is crazy as it is. I'm not about to make it worse. I can't be in my cell all the time. So look, this is my line of reasoning, right? I'm thinking this. And then here's the key part is I say to myself, well, I'm already here doing a life sentence. So I'm going to go to general population and take my chances. And if somebody kills me, well, I guess I don't have to worry about doing the rest of this life sentence anymore now, do I? But
You
I'm
were
17 thinking this kind of thought.
Yeah, yeah.
You
Wow.
were
Yeah, that's
already
wild,
at
man.
that point.
Yeah.
Wow. What was your first memories? What hit you first? I mean, I remember when I walked in and they brought me to my housing unit, it was the smell. We've talked about that. What really hit you first?
As I'm walking down a cell gallery, I mean, these guys are like built. They're like all ripped. Like their arms are like my legs. And I'm like 150 pounds soaking wet, if that, a 17-year-old. And these are like fully formed men, in their prime. And and that's really what came up. That's really what came up. That, and the other thing also was that in the county jail and even in the reception center, because I had a hard time adjusting psychologically, I was in the forensic unit in the mental health wing. And so the civilians are in charge there. Okay, the officers are there, but they're only there in a secondary role as a security. But the idea of being in an environment where the COs are in control and there really are very few civilians, that was a terrifying thought to me as well.
Right. Did you went in, you've mentioned you went in with a murder charge and with a rape charge. And in prisons like that, a murder charge sort of puts you on a certain level at the top of the heap, right? Like very respected.
Yes, it does. Yeah, you have respect. Well, this guy takes care of his business. He killed somebody.
But at the same
That
time,
it engenders respect. As
but
crazy
the-
as that sounds.
exactly, but the sexual part puts you at the very bottom, right?
Right, right. But when you put the two together, the murder charge is irrelevant. The only
is.
thing that matters is a sex offense. That's what controls.
Right, right. That trumps the murder charge.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Right.
And
Interesting.
Jeff, I gotta ask this just now. Like, you get convicted of this thing, and we've all heard it, right? Like, a lot of people in prison just say, "I'm innocent." Like, no, I didn't do it. They didn't catch me with this. They didn't catch. I did what I did. I know, like I did it. But like, you have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that you are innocent. You knew it then, right? You know it now. Like, I mean, how the hell do you just not go, this is not like I'm gonna
It's a
go.
mistake.
This is crazy.
Yeah, did you even like voice that?
Well, I did voice it, but not initially. But let me give some context. So first of all,
Yeah, that'd be great.
I consider it to be a misnomer, to be a misconception that people like profess their innocence in prison. Okay, because first of all, you wouldn't do that as a general rule of thumb, because if your conviction gets overturned, but you have to go back to trial, somebody else might look at you as their way of going home early. In other words, they could claim that while walking the yard, you confess, he told me he did it in order to go home early. So you would never say that. You would particularly not say that if you had a sex offense, because you wouldn't want to draw attention. Really, you're innocent? What is it you're innocent of exactly? Let me see your papers. So you wouldn't
Right.
want that to be said. So you would never say that in there. Now, that being said, and I also want to mention that there's certain contexts where maintaining your innocence works against you. So, for example, if the parole board wants to see you take a program that addresses the crime that you're incarcerated for. So when you take the sex offender training program, there's an explicit guilt admission requirement tied to that. You are expected to admit guilt to the instructor, to the other prisoners. You're supposed to give all the details, and they want it all in writing. And if you maintain innocence instead of doing that, then you would be kicked out of the program and deemed to have refused. Kind of a similar rationale on a 12-step program where you have to acknowledge you have a problem, right, in order for any progress to be made. So in that context, it would work against you.
So faced with that, what did you do?
Yeah. So if people ask you what you're there for,
No.
I would do.
When you had to fill out that form.
No, I
right?
refuse. I refuse. No. The corrections
You didn't take my
counselor
program.
and the authorities tried everything they could No, I refuse to take the program. They try to pressure me into it, though. They refuse. Listen, I was supposed to be in a medium for 7 years. The last 7 years, they refused to drop my security level. They would not allow me to go on the honor block waiting list. They did not allow me to participate in the family reunion program. So there's trailers located on the prison grounds
Oh,
for your
sanctions.
family if you're married, or you could get a family trailer. Right. So, until I took that program, I was not going to be allowed to. So I was never allowed to do that, and they refused to transfer me closer to home. Okay, so they did everything that they could do to press me into taking it. I refused to do it. But and those are all instances where maintaining your innocence would work against you.
Against you.
Okay, and lastly, I maintain my innocence at the parole board. And if you don't express remorse and take responsibility, but instead
They
claim
kick you
you're
back in.
innocent, you're already slimmer than slim. Chances of making it out on parole have suddenly plummeted. You went from 2% down to like half of one, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe.
For real.
Now, did the guards, let's break this out now. You have guards and you have fellow inmates. Did the guards give you a hard time all the time?
No,
And did
no.
did it ever get physical?
Yes. So, okay. So let me break that out. So, yeah, sometimes, but it was not like a constant thing. But there were a few times when like I was working in food service, like the last like 5 years of my sentence, because I had completed all the programs that they were to complete in Elmira that had any interest in. And so there were prisoners that would come to me and would say, yo, the COO is over there telling people what you're in prison for. Like he was telling people, hoping to
Wow.
motivate them to do something to me. But again, that happened a couple of times, but that was not a constant thing. Just like in general, I think, I did reasonably well at hiding what I was incarcerated for, but at times people found that out. But look, maybe in the course of 16 years, I got beat up maybe 6 or 7 times, which actually is not really considered to be that much. And by the way, just to draw a little dark humor into all of this, when I was in my mid-20s, okay, here and there I started coming up with the victory here and there, right? Now I wasn't a regular. Here and there I would win. Here and there I would win in my late 20s. Okay, early on in my career they were all losses. All right.
So Jeff, and we're
Yeah.
talking with Jeff, just to reset the room here. We're talking with Jeff Deskovic, a friend of ours who at a very young age was wrongfully committed for committing the crimes of murder and rape, and spent 16 years of the best years of his life rotting away in some miserable prison in upstate New York, and now has taken the experience and we'll get into that, but just doing amazing stuff to help others. Jane, who is a friend of ours, she says deep bows to Jeffrey for sharing his experiences with us. Sid asks, could you have asked for a lawyer while you were incarcerated to help you with the situation whereby the guards in the prison were trying to push you into or coerce you into signing something that you absolutely weren't going to do? Was that a strategy you ever considered?
No, because they wouldn't have given me a lawyer. No, these are correction officers and are correctional officials. This is not, they're on the street and you're a suspect and it's the police. So that's a totally different scenario. You don't have a right to an attorney under those conditions. That would have helped me if when the police were trying to coerce the false confession out of me, which is what led to my original arrest. If I would have asked for a lawyer then that would have stopped everything.
Right. There's now though, this is things like that are changing now. I think there's a lot more people like, and I know guys inside in the feds, you file a 2255, right? And you go and you get it, you push it up, right? And you just keep pushing until you get something, and it's a pain in the ass, and you get reprimanded for it in all kind of sly ways, which you times 10, right? So but now there's people that have gotten out, right? And they're like, okay, you can bring on somebody that may not be an attorney, but like understands that process, can help file the paperwork for you and all that. Would that have done anything? Like if you think, now there's more of that available, would you have brought somebody like that in, or is it just like, nope, I got to ride this out from the inside and Go.
Well, I mean, I lost 7 appeals. I mean, I had I had actual lawyers who did a damn good job, unlike the public defender that I had that did, basically sat on his hands and didn't defend me at the trial. I actually did have outstanding representation throughout 7 appeals. The problem was that, the judges, half it's only half the battle if you got the facts and law on your side. The other half the battle is, are the judges actually going to, critically review and give you a legit objective decision, or are they just going to rubber stamp deny the appeal, which is usually, what happens? Are they going to look for ways to try to save all the time, effort, and energy that went into convicting you in the first place? They're trying to preserve that. So all that goes out the window if they order a new trial, because then they have to do it all over again. So the judicial complicity in preserving wrongful convictions is what derailed me on the appeal process, not the lawyers.
Jeff, let me ask you a question. I haven't asked any other guests this, and it may just sort of touch a nerve or may not even be a fair question to ask. Your parents were alive when you were going through all of this and when you were convicted?
Yes.
Okay. Would you say that, geez, I don't even know if I should ask. Was there support of you?
No, ask.
I am. Thank you. Was there support of you unfailing? And, particularly as you bring in the rape conviction, which to a lot of people, is, that one unspeakable crime. Were they always, did they always believe you when you were saying I'm innocent? Or were they mightily challenged by it?
Yeah, so my father was never involved in my life in any aspect at all, and that kind of played a role in how the police were able to victimize me, because they used the good cop, bad cop role, and I began to look at the officer who was pretending to be my friend as a father figure. So it intersected in that aspect. But beyond that, I mean, my mother and my extended family, they all believed in my innocence, with the exception of one who was law enforcement and his daughter. They all, other than them two, believed in my innocence. The interesting thing, though, is that their belief in my innocence did not translate into them assisting me, like either on the morale level by keeping in regular contact with me, visit, letters, phone, all of that. Nor did it translate when my mother made rounds several times trying to get everybody to put a manageable portion of money in so that I could hire the legal help that I needed. So I mean, they believed in it, but I mean, they believed in me, but their belief didn't translate into anything. And I would say just the fact of having a sex offense as one of the charges was a total non-factor in everything.
Okay,
So
go D.
yeah, so I really want to know, like, what was the piece of evidence, if you would, that like locked in the jury's mind that you were guilty of this? Like, was it one piece
Because
of evidence?
the police
several
coerced.
pieces? All circumstantial, obviously.
Yes.
He admitted it.
I'm going to tell you. I get your question. The police coerced the false confession out of me. Okay. There was a 6-week run up to that. So in which half the time the police, first of all, I got on the police radar because they interviewed students from the high school, and some of the students told the police they might want to talk to me because I didn't quite fit in with them. So that's how I got on their radar. They thought it was suspicious that I was emotional about the murder and rape of a classmate that I barely knew. They thought that was some sort of outward sign of my being sorry for what I did. And a third thing was they got a psychological profile which purported to have the characteristics of the actual perpetrator. And I had the misfortune of matching that. So that put me on their radar. In terms of the actual evidence, so for about 6 weeks, they played this cat and mouse game with me. Half the time they talked to me as a suspect. The other half the time they pretend like they needed my help to solve the crime.
Wow.
So, they pretended to be a friend, but also Jeff is
crazy.
Jeff is this junior detective helper was a theme and because before I was a teenager, I wanted to be a cop when I grew up. And so them playing that role, asking me opinion, my opinion. Yeah, I'm on the team. And that, exactly. So eventually it culminated into what I'm about to explain. So they got me to agree to take a polygraph test. So they said, look, we got some new information. Want to share that with you. That's going to allow you to be more helpful to us. So
This
the
is
next
fucking
day,
disgusting.
I went to the police station instead of going to high school. So my mother and grandmother think I'm in school. They drive me to the town. They drive me across county lines. So from Peekskill in Westchester County to the town of Brewster in Putnam County. There's 3 cops that come with me. Naturally, they let me ride in the car by myself with a cop pretending to be my friend. The polygraphist is a Putnam County Sheriff's investigator, but he's dressed like a civilian. He never revealed himself as law enforcement. He never read me my rights.
Oh my
They give me
God, this is crazy.
There's no attorney present. They don't give me anything to eat. They give me this brochure, but I don't understand the brochure about how the polygraph works. But then I'm there to help the police anyway. So what
Why
does
would
it
you even care?
matter?
Why does it
Let's
matter?
just get on with it.
Right.
Right. So then from there, they put me in small room and the polygraphist gives me countless cups of coffee, to get me
Is your
nervous.
nerves
Then he
jittering?
wires me up. Right. Then he wires me up to this machine. And then he launches into his 3rd-degree tactics. So he invades my personal space, raises his voice at me. He keeps asking me the same questions over and over again. And my as each hour passes by, my fear increases in proportion to the time. And he kept that up for 6.5 to 7 hours.
This is unbelievable. It should be
Towards
illegal.
the
This is
end, he
illegal.
says, what do you mean you didn't do it? You just told me through the test results that you did. We just want you to verbally confirm it. So that really shoots my fear through the roof. Then the cop, he leaves the room. The cop who's pretending to be my friend comes in and says, look, they're going to harm you. I've been holding them off. I can't do that any longer. You got to help yourself. Look, just tell them what they want to hear. They'll stop what they're doing. You can go home after this. You're
Right.
not going to be arrested.
I can't
Being
believe
young,
this.
being young, naive, frightened, 16 years old. I'm not thinking long term. I'm only concerned with my safety in the moment.
Immediate moment.
I was in fear of my life because the fact that I didn't know where I was and no one else did either loomed large in my mind. I'm not used to talking to adult men, any
Oh my
people who are
God.
conducting themselves like that. And I was just totally overwhelmed emotionally and psychologically. So I made up a story based on this information they gave me in the course of the interrogation in the 6 weeks run up to that. And by the time it was all said and done, I collapsed onto the floor into a fetal position, crying uncontrollably. That
Listen,
was the only piece of evidence that they had against me.
I'm
To
so
answer your
disgusted right
question.
now. Like I can't even tell you the level of disgust in my mind and my soul and my spirit and my heart right now for you. If I mean not for you, for this ordeal that you went through. And those cops should be arrested. They should be imprisoned. Yo, this is ridiculous, man.
No doubt. Jeff, so let's get back to prison, where I
Right.
love
Sorry.
to bring the story back to. So
Yeah.
you remember walking down the line and you remember passing cells of, you described them full grown men, who spent 8 hours a day, on the weight pile and who'd been down for a long time. And here you are, some young, skinny little kid, going through this. They bring you to a cell. Did you have a cellie? Were you alone?
I was alone. I was alone in the cell that they brought me to.
Okay. Could you describe what the cell was like?
Yeah, maybe it was I'm not good with numbers, so I'm not going to give height, width and length estimates, but suffice it to say that if I put both of my arms stretched out, I could touch one side of it and I would be maybe like half an inch short of being able to touch the other end of it. And it wasn't all that much bigger when I went the long way of that.
Okay.
So yeah, that was a cell. It had the bars in it and everything like that. And, the bed is the main piece of furniture in the cell, and it's located adjacent to the bathroom sink and the toilet. And there's like a rope that's attached from the back of the cell to the front of the cell bar that you use like a clothesline if you wash your own clothes and you hang it up there. There's a red bucket in the cell because Elmira's so old and antiquated that there is no hot water in the cell. So you put the red bucket on the gate, and
Stinger.
twice a day the porter, that would be the cook. Yeah, you're right. But what I was saying is, for purposes of cleaning, you put the bucket on the gate and the porter would come around and he would pour hot water from the slop sink
you
into your
serious?
bucket, and that's
Yeah,
That's
yes,
it's
I'm
like
serious.
hot
it's like
water.
medieval.
It's Dickensian. It's amazing.
Yes, yeah.
Now,
I don't know what
what
that
about
word means, but yes, I agree.
Dickens? You know, old English. You know,
Antiquated.
worse than that. What about meals? So they throw you in there, and you know, you just sitting there.
Yo,
All
man.
right, now what? Right? You know,
Yo.
what was your?
Yeah.
Did you got out to go to meals? Right? The mess hall, wherever.
Yes.
Cafeteria.
Yeah, the mess hall, the mess hall. That's right, the
Okay.
mess hall.
Was that the first time? That had to be pretty frightening for you.
That was pretty frightening for me. I mean, I didn't understand, even the whole procedure. I mean, that you stay on your place on the line, and and you have to pick up the tray, and you have to remember to get the spoon at the end, and remember not to lose that spoon and throw it in the bucket when you leave, lest you get in trouble for trying to smuggle something out.
Contraband.
Then you sit down, and you can't get up until the guards tell you. But when the guards tell you to get up, everybody, whether you're done or not, it's irrelevant. You got to get up, and they always played this sadistic game. If it was a halfway decent meal, not that that was all that often, but when it did happen, they would rush you out of there in about 10 or 12 minutes. And if it was a terrible meal, you might be forced to sit there for as long as 45 minutes in a where it's very poorly ventilated. It's too many people, so there's a lot of body heat on top, and all the water and the water
Sadistic,
pitchers that
man.
are on the table it's all been sitting there for like an hour before we've all walked in. So you might be stuck there for 45 minutes. So yes.
And what about where you would sit? What was there typically at certainly a place like that, there's racial divisions that are rampant, right?
No. I've heard that's a federal thing. That wasn't the case in New York State. And in any event, not only was there not any sitting not along racial lines, but you had to sit down with the same company, the same gallery that you came in. You're sitting down with those same
individuals.
people, same
Right.
individuals.
Did anybody approach you in any fashion, either at a friendly or threateningly, as you being a new, inmate there?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
What
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, so the porter, who had been kind of an old timer, I mean, he's really who got me started with even going to the law library. He asked me how much
Always
time.
trust the law library.
Yeah, he's asked me, how much time you got, and and he said, look, he said, look, I got William Kunstler representing me, right? Nonetheless, I even go to the law library and try to pull cases and give him ideas. So, I'm
Right.
sure you don't have a lawyer on that skill level. So I think it's important for you to go to the law
do this,
library
yeah.
and do this and give ideas. And being as though my trial lawyer essentially didn't defend me, and I knew that, I didn't trust lawyers anymore. So that person helped me. That old timer helped me that way. There were other people here and there that gave me different survival tactics and tips. Like when you're in your cell, don't talk out of your gate. Just when you're in your cell, just be quiet. Don't get in conversations that don't belong to you. Don't you dare just get involved in any kind of conversation about what's going to be watched on the television. Don't borrow nothing. You can't let nobody take anything from you either. Don't gamble. Stay the heck away from people, that are homosexual, unless that's your lifestyle, because you're going to be inviting a lot of problems with that. So all these are different tips, survival tips and tactics that I learned. If something happens in the yard, throw your back against the wall. Keep everybody in front of you.
Yo, I can
all
imagine
those
that.
kind of things.
Yeah, I can imagine that you're an encyclopedia of how to survive in prison. Because you went to prison so
Yes,
early.
I am.
Right, because you went to prison so early,
Mhm.
like these things became like you said, your survival guide. Like, other people that have gone to prison, like
Yes.
I've been around people like old timers, they've gone to prison, not so much the same scenario where they're innocent, first of all, they've been coerced by the police into giving a false confession, and they've been incarcerated for life, basically, at such a young age. They have this, they know the prison rules, but I can just imagine how the prison rules for you was just your whole survival guide, man. It's just
Right.
crazy.
No, it's true. No, it is. It is. And I learned this. Listen, I would study people for like a month or two before I even said hello. just to see you got some like metaphorical storm cloud above your head where you're
Right.
going to self-destruct. And so my only goal is make sure when you self-destruct that you don't manage to take me down with you, and to know everybody who's on that cell block and who's in what gang, and staying away from those people so that when something goes down, I'm not, they don't hit me too. So all those were, and not, sleeping with your feet towards the bars, not your head, so nobody harpoons you through the cell bar. So all those
Yeah, to the
tactics,
bars, yeah.
right? So all
Wow.
all those things were tactics. But if I didn't learn all of that and listen up, I wouldn't have made it. I mean, there were a lot of people that didn't make it.
Yeah.
That didn't realize that things were real, and they knew it all, and they actually knew nothing. And and they didn't. I used to metaphorically scream when I would see young people come through, as I got a little bit of experience, and they were not doing things the right way. They were not listening, and inevitably they would either get sucked up into a gang, or they would get cut, or they would get beat, or they get sent to the box. They just simply wouldn't make it through one way or another. And I would metaphorically scream as I watch it, but I couldn't do anything because they're not listening to no one else. They ain't gonna listen to me either.
Well, wait, you're saying you would metaphorically scream.
Yeah, in my head, in my mind.
Okay. You then would, one of the lessons you learned was mind your own business, right?
Yes,
Right.
exactly. Yes. Yeah, because if I tell this young kid that ain't listening to nobody else, yo, don't do this, don't do that, stay away from him, they're gonna go and tell that to the other person. Now I got a beef now.
Right, but you're gonna beef. Yeah, but you're a seasoned vet. At this point, you're a seasoned vet as far as
Right.
knowing how
Right.
the prison system works, what you should
Right.
do and what you shouldn't do.
Yes.
Listen, and all the episodes we've had on the yard, 25 episodes, this is the first time we ever had anybody that basically confessed to doing something they didn't do, was then released through DNA evidence. Like, your story's just crazy, like a Netflix story.
So,
As I'm listening to you tell this, I feel like I'm listening to the making of a murderer, kind of. But you're a better guy, of course. This is crazy, man.
So Jeff, like all that stuff that you learned and that stuck with you, that you survived, right? And I know we want to keep this on the prison experience, but I gotta ask, like, I learned a lot of that stuff too, and you just have to, right? You survive or don't, right? And
Exactly. Right.
it doesn't just turn off when you leave, right? Like
No.
you get your innocence, right? You get, like, it took me I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years to like be comfortable, like having my back to the door, in a restaurant.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Stuff
Right.
like that. I can imagine, like,
Right.
how was that for you? I mean, like,
Yeah, I think that ties back to the prison and an aspect of deprogramming from the prison, right? So we'll keep it tied to that, so Richard can feel good about where the conversation's going now, right? So
Please, Richard. Please, Richard.
So
There's number one rule on the yard.
I know.
Shot
I know.
call. Done.
All right, yeah, right. So listen, real quick. So I forced myself to break prison habits. Like, I would, I would sit in a seat where my back was to everybody else in a restaurant. I stopped using the prison lingo just to try to, and I broke other things. But it took me years for that. I mean, initially when I would come when another man would come in my circumference, I mean, the adrenaline turns on. I'm sizing him up. I'm looking at both his hands. I'm ready to go in a minute, and all this is just going on in my mind. He has no idea that any of this is taking place, but it took me some years in order to just deprogram from that to where everything, I don't go through that anymore. But you have to, that's part of surviving in prison. I mean, you're in prison where your life might not be worth a pack of cigarettes on any given day.
Or a can of mackerel.
Right, exactly. Yeah, right. People turn on each other though for silly things and small things. I don't think anybody in the free world would get into a fight over somebody owing them a pack of cigarettes but doesn't pay. But in very few, and it would be an unusual context, right? But in prison, that would be a problem right there, because you wouldn't want someone to walk all over you, right? Because then everybody's coming in after that and it's all over with. But who's thinking like that? Look, you stole $4 from me, so you know what? Keep it. You needed it more than me. I'm just not dealing with you anymore. But it's not looked like that in prison.
It's the streets, yeah.
Right.
Hey, Jeff, you mentioned that among the adjustments you had to make was abandoning prison lingo. What
Yes.
was or what is the word or phrase that was one that you would use a lot while you were in prison that you knew you had to sort of shed if you were going to actually, get away? Does one come to mind?
Yeah. So when people would ask me what I was in for, I would just say, I've got a body. The phrase "a body," which is reference to like as a murder charge, right?
Okay.
That would be
There's a
that would
body
be,
in the trunk,
you know,
son.
that
What's
that
it gonna
that
be?
or somebody or even just saying, word up, or that might be this is silly me talking like this now, but it's
I
this the
love
art.
it.
We're gonna do it. No, so that would be so that would be something, or use that would be an example of something, or
So you
or
said
saying,
one.
somebody got to burn. So using the phrase burner, like somebody, I don't use
Oh.
that phrase anymore, but that's a
Yeah.
prison thing.
Angie, who's with us,
Mhm.
she brings up, I don't even know what this, radio, walking, and fish are 3 words, prison words, that she remembers that.
Walking for sure.
What does walking mean?
Walking is when the guards are walking by, like you.
Yeah,
like you-
walking. Yeah.
Hey,
Well,
walking, like
so
you
I
coming in,
so
coming
yeah.
by.
I didn't hear it in the feds. I never
listen.
heard it
There's
in
a
the feds
count.
walking. Never heard that one.
No, there's a okay. So listen,
The
there's a
state thing.
count. They make a count. They do a live count
Yeah,
to
4
make
p.m.
sure
every-
that no one's escaped and everyone is that no one's died. Okay,
Right.
so
Yeah.
the prisoners, as a type of respect and code that we have amongst ourselves, to not let another prisoner get walked up on by the guard where he doesn't know, you'd say walking. So that means, whatever you're doing that you're not supposed to do, if you got your sheet
Okay.
up, but then take that, whatever you're doing, just, be legit for like a minute. Okay. Let them walk by and then go back to whatever you're doing.
Yeah,
Right.
It means they're walking the beat, not walking the Green Mile.
yeah, exactly. Jeff,
Um,
use the word deprogramming, which is the first time I've actually heard that, and it makes total sense because, and I don't know if this is how it is in state, but in the feds, like you go to a new facility and everybody's like, oh, just get your program down, like start programming and you'll be good.
Yo, yeah.
Time will go
I
fast,
forgot about
right?
that, Seth.
Like, and it's like, oh shit, like if we're getting programmed one way and then you get out, like you absolutely have to like deprogram the programming, right? Like it's you get used to a specific pattern and a way of life, and it makes total sense.
And I got a question for you.
So
real
that's,
quick, Jeff.
Go ahead.
Oh, you want to answer that?
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Um,
no, I see a really interesting question in the chat that pertains
Oh,
to in prison.
Okay,
Go ahead.
answer it. Get answer
So
it.
Sid says, did I ever feel like I was losing hope at any point, like accepting the fact you might spend the rest of your life in prison? So yes, at the end. So a 15 a life sentence, which means that you have to do 15 years minimally. Then you go to the parole board. The life part of it means that there's never a point in time where the state's legally obligated to release you. So this context was that my appeals were over, right? Appeals were over. That was 11 years. I wrote letters looking for help for 4 years after that, not getting answers. Went to the parole board, got turned down there because I maintained my innocence, and I was told to come back in 2 years. So that last year, I was fighting to not lose hope. I mean, I had placed an ad looking for a pen pal, and somebody wrote me, and like there was a stranger that here, I'll use the prison expression. Okay. I was this stranger answered my ad that I didn't know from a can of paint. Okay. And he wrote me, and I was openly asking this stranger, yo, should I give up? Should I just go ahead and kill myself and be done with it? I'm never getting out of here. So in my last year, I struggled with that. And I thought that it was all over at that point.
Okay,
Go ahead, Dick.
Richard. Okay. So what I wanted to ask you was, first of all, I see that you're able to transform. I heard you say the free world earlier.
Yes.
I know what the free world is.
Mhm.
We all have been incarcerated, know what the free world is. And then I see how you just broke down the lingo. So I see that you're able to really like adjust. Did you feel that you had to be other than yourself in a lot of ways that you really weren't, like from how growing up in your childhood, that kind of shapes your early
Yes.
development and then who you become in your character, personality? It seemed like you kind of like shifted that and learned
Yes.
to put on a mask, if you will.
Yes. No, I do. That is a great way of putting it. I did put on a mask. Yes. I mean, yeah.
So in that
I
sense,
mean,
in that sense, real quick, you said you was assaulted several times. I think you mentioned
yes,
the number 7 or
I
8
did.
times. Did
Yeah,
you
yeah,
ever
6 or
have
7
to
times.
stand your ground where you either had to even think the thought in your mind that you might have to assault somebody, or did you
Yes,
ever have to assault somebody
yes.
to catch yourself?
I regret to say, and I know it's not logical to say this, right? Because I was defending myself, but I regret to say that there was one time that I had to assault. These 3 guys were coming, and so the setting is this, right? Is that I got sent to Shawangunk, which is a maxi max prison, right? It's the highest level of security you can possibly imagine. All these guys was there. All these guys had been down. Okay, we'll go to prison lingo again. All these guys had been down like 10, 15, 20 years. Okay, and so this vigilante mentality was really thoroughly ingrained into their psyche. And they went to the law library and pulled my case out, made copies of it, passed it out all over the place, and the whole
Wow.
environment got hostile. And this was the one and only time I had a paid lawyer, and I was filing in federal court, and so I thought I was going to win because I was innocent. Okay, but there was no way I was going to fight any of these guys. I'll use another prison lingo. There was no way I was going to fight any of these guys straight up. Okay, that wasn't going to happen. Okay, so it would be just my luck. So I can't fight them with my hands. They're gonna. So I'm gonna have to use a weapon or something. But it would
Right.
be just my luck. I'll keep talking. I'm gonna keep talking prison lingo. Okay, it would be
Yeah,
just my, as
I
it were.
love it.
It would just be. It would just be my luck that I would beat the case that I'm there for in the first place. But then I catch another charge, so now I can't go home. Okay, so I was letting stuff slide that I had no business letting get slide. Okay, I was supposed to take it to them. All right, but I was
That's
letting
right.
stuff go because I didn't want to catch a new one.
That's right.
Okay,
You don't
and
get to
all
know
that
one.
was
That's right.
doing was getting them more and more. All that was doing was getting them more and more bold. And it got to the point like I felt any day now they were coming to stab me. Okay, and so I
Right.
wasn't about to just sit there and wait for that to
You wasn't
happen.
going out like no
Okay, so
sucker.
I assaulted. Right. So I assaulted. I assaulted the biggest dude out of the bunch.
That's how you do
Except
it.
that the damn thing backfired on me. The damn thing backfired on me because clocking somebody in the head is not something that I would normally do. Okay.
Right.
And so I actually went into shock after I did that. I froze. I dropped what I used,
Right.
and
The
like a circle
weapon.
formed around us. Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. But and this guy picked up this 10-pound weight plate, and I got hit multiple times on the side of my head, man. And I almost
What?
got killed.
Oh,
Damn.
So that was all because I was there. That was all because I was there. They thought I was a sex offender. That's the whole point.
amazing.
But that's an example. That's an example, though, of doing something that I regret. Okay,
Right.
that's
Right.
not something that I
But you
would.
really
that I
didn't
would-
have a choice. There's something I need to interrupt this great dialogue. Our friend Pinky it's her birthday tomorrow.
Happy birthday.
And
Early.
uh,
Birthday.
she was late joining us tonight, as she says, because she was getting her birthday cake. And she eats it at a certain time when it's her birthday. And we all wish her the happiest of birthdays, Pinky, and thank you for Pinky is a man. I knew that. Adrian is telling me that Pinky is a man. I knew that. And what a man he is. But in any event, Pinky, happy birthday and thank you for sharing part of it, I guess, with us and with Jeff. Jeff, we're going to get into very shortly you talking about the work that you're doing now, but several people have raised this question, and it is the question: Pinky is not a man. Pinky
What's
is.
going on, man?
This is
Control
all
the
being
show, man.
recorded.
It
As you-
doesn't really
This is
matter.
going to be out there forever. You
Pinky
keep getting
may be
things wrong.
fluid, and how he or she
Essence of
identifies.
Pinky is having a birthday.
All good on the yard. Pinky.
Happy early
so,
birthday, Pinky. Period.
Happy birthday to Pinky, no matter what.
Exactly. From us from the yard.
Exactly. But let me get back to Jeff
yard.
here. Jeff, I asked you before we went on. I said, Jeff, are you happy now? And are you bitter? And you said, no, you weren't particularly bitter, which is, and a number of people have asked that in the chat room, which it would seem that if anyone had a right to be bitter, you would. You would be bitter against the cops, who, took advantage of your youth and, out of their desire to bring a case, anything was okay. And normally, they'd be coercive with someone who actually did it, and the ends justify the means, maybe, but the ends don't justify the means here because you didn't do it. And you were put into prison where the guards, treated you and gave you shit about a crime you didn't commit. And there were inmates who, pulled your jacket and were spreading around, discussion about crimes that you had committed, which you hadn't committed. And in a broadest sense, you went away when you were what, 17?
Yes.
And the years that you should have been, going to football games and having fun at college and meeting girls and starting a career and building a life, were deprived from you. They were taken away from you and replaced by, just the most awful imaginable circumstances to befall anybody. And it's one thing if you did it. I mean, it would still be terrible and wrong. And there's still huge problems in the criminal justice system, even for people who are guilty. But for someone who's innocent to go through this, how do you not walk around angry and resentful and pissed off and ready to smack anybody who looks at you the wrong way? How do you not have that feeling?
Yeah. So, well, firstly, in terms of what I lost, just to crystallize that, and then I'll get right to the heart of your question. Births, deaths, weddings. I didn't graduate the high school. I didn't go to the prom. Rites of passage, finishing education at a more traditional age. And that also made my reintegration really difficult because I had never before had a driver's license. I hadn't lived alone. I had never went shopping. I never had to balance a budget. I never wrote a check. So all that having been said, the answer is I want to enjoy my life as much as I can, and I cannot do that if I'm angry or bitter. And another line of reasoning is that I've already lost so much as it is. Why would I want to, in effect, lose like everything else? If I was to be angry or bitter, it's not like I would be adversely affecting any of the people involved in what happened. So really, I would be the only loser in that scenario. And the vehicle that allows me to actualize that is I take the energy that I feel and I channel it into the advocacy work that I do. My mission in the world, is to free people who are wrongfully imprisoned and to prevent that from happening to other people. So policy work, while also doing some work on terms of broader justice reform. But it's my purpose in the world to do that. So that's how I make sense of everything in a kaleidoscopic type of way. It's healing, it's cathartic. My suffering counts for something. It means for something, and I have like a inner peace or resignation about myself when I look at it like that.
Are there any lessons to be learned from this?
Yeah, many. Sure. So so one thing would be this is so I have this formula, and this would apply if my overcoming this and other things we'll get into later. One lesson would be this is look, have goals, have a realistic plan. Remember that the goal is the goal. The plan is not the goal. So you got to be flexible. So if you have it mapped out one way and a different door opens for you, as long as it's still taking you towards your goal, you make the adjustment. Don't be afraid of hard work. There's no reasons why you can't do something. There might be reasons why it's more difficult, no reasons why you can't. And never give up. And in terms of never giving up, and I applied this as to myself while I was wrongfully in prison, I would say to myself and still say to myself, I can't go on anymore. I'm going to give up here. But, maybe this is the key moment right here. Maybe I was on the verge of a breakthrough, except that because I stopped, it's not going to happen. So even though I can't go on anymore, I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm going to see what happens next after that. And then once you break through, once you come out on the other side, you're supposed to reach back and help other people in the same position while doing some work on the preventative side. And so that applies far beyond wrongful conviction, incarceration, justice reform. I think that that applies if you're homeless, somebody who's a domestic violence abuse survivor, a sexual assault survivor, someone who's had some kind of debilitating illness, any kind of challenge on whatever extreme or not so extreme, but discrimination, racism, you name it. I believe that I know that that formula can apply to that. And so I really believe that whatever I put my mind to, whatever most people put their mind to, as long as you're willing to leave it all out on the field, to draw a sports metaphor, it could happen for you. You just have to want it enough and work enough for it.
Jeff, top 3 books you read in prison, so I can tell you're a reader.
Okay, sure, absolutely. So one was Mankind's Search for Meaning, which was by Viktor Frankl, which pertained to when people were surviving in concentration camps.
Okay, interesting. Never heard of that. Thank you.
And another one was How to Be an Adult in Relationships. That was by David Richo. And last one was a political book. It was really thick. I found my way able to read this like 600 or 700 page book. It was a page turner. It was called The Ambition and the Power, The Fall of Jim Wright, he was the Speaker of the House at one point. And so that kind of whetted my appetite for reading about books on politics. So so look, I used, so from 1998 to 2006, I read three or four nonfiction books a week, and I concentrated mainly on self-help books, books on relationships, and governmental abuse expose books, and books on politics / presidential history. So when you study presidential history, in a way, you're kind of tracing the collective mindset of the country as it moved from stage to stage, and you can understand current events more now if you understood, what happened before.
Noam Chomsky.
I read Noam Chomsky. Yeah, I did. I did read Noam Chomsky before. My all-time favorite book actually set in motion a chain of events that culminated into my being exonerated, and that was it was called Chicken Soup for the Prisoner's Soul. Chicken Soup for the Prisoner's Soul.
Wow, I never heard that one.
Yeah, Tom Lagana, and it had like an anthology in it. It was like one chapter from many books. So at that point in the bid, right? I was just, yeah. See, I know. I'm not gonna. You're gonna let everyone know what I'm doing.
I see. I'm with you.
I know. So at that point in the bid, it was a struggle just to come up with a new idea as to who to write to next. So I was going to the general library just to figure out who I could write to and try to get help from. And so when I saw that book had contact information for about half of the people that had contributed a chapter, that was the whole theory where I took that book out, and it worked out because this letter. Yeah, this letter that I wrote, a book author in care of the publishing company, was instead sent to an investigator, and she connected me to the Innocence Project, who took my case, and that was the first of that. Yeah, that was the first.
See, that's what made me bring up the book. See, I knew something there was a thread there.
Yes.
What was the food that you missed most that you had to have when you got out?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's I'd never gotten that question before, by the way. So believe it or not, every now and then, for me, some of that prison stuff was really, it was comfort food in the sense that it was meals that I made myself with a hot pot in my cell. It was not, just to be clear, not the state food. Okay.
Microwave.
I like having octopus and having the calamari and the tit, but the height of that is having fried Jack Mac. I mean, that would be the highlight of 2 months. Fried Mac,
the fried macaroni balls, right?
All right, so let's talk about, you got out at age what?
32.
You're 32 years old. You had this organization working on your behalf. And
the Innocence Project, right.
The Innocence Project. And I would imagine, that as it became clear that you had a chance of getting out, there was conversation about you getting involved with the organization when you did get out. Or did that come to you afterwards? That this was the work?
No, Well, I tried to get involved in working with them afterwards once I got out, but they felt like, well, if they do that, we do that for you, then we have to do that for everybody. And they weren't willing to open that door. Okay. And on top of that, as great as they are, they only want to do DNA cases, and that's only available in 5 to 12% of. And so to me, innocence is innocence. So whether you can do that under a microscope
Right.
or pound the pavement and find witnesses, it doesn't matter to me. So I didn't agree with that, and I'm not just there as window dressing. I'm part of the team. Okay, you tell me what role you want me to play, but you're not going to tell me what specific words to use either. And I'm contributing to the strategy. So none of that was a role for me with them. Okay, so hence my started my own organization. But I realized once when I came out at the press conference, I gave an off the cuff 2.5 hour speech in front of all the media when I was released. Everything I had always wanted to say, but could never get anybody to hear me say in the course of 16 years. And so that made me realize that I could do advocacy work without necessarily being a lawyer. And so for 5 years, I was an individual advocate, meaning that.
I mean, couldn't you have done like 2.5 hours in like 2.5 seconds? Just like, I told you. Like that would be the press conference. That would be the whole press conference.
No,
like,
but
I was innocent
for the last 16 years.
I was innocent.
Didn't do this.
No, but I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you. But the point is that what I had to say went far beyond me and far beyond my case. It had to do with the system as a whole.
Right. No, of course. Right. I'm just saying, like,
So
come on.
how does your advocacy manifest itself? You're not a lawyer. How do you, I mean, you identify people.
I'll explain. I got your question. So for the first 5 years, my advocacy work manifested itself through doing speaking engagements throughout the country. I was a columnist for 5 years for a weekly newspaper, but I've been published overall in 10 different publications. I was regularly meeting with elected officials, and I trade privacy for awareness in exchange for furthering the policy issue. So I did that for 5 years. And I just kind of nibbled on the edges of cases. So I allowed my name to be used sometimes in a media advisory for some other wrongful conviction case. And so, and I wrote about some of the cases too, when people were still wrongfully convicted. So that was 5 years. But then when I got some financial compensation, I decided that I would take $1.5 million from that and start the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice, where we could directly be involved. And we've been able to get 11 people home. We've been able to pass 3 laws in New York. We're part of a bigger coalition called It Can Happen to You, which I'm an advisory board member of. And we passed another 5 laws there. We have 10 cases active. And I want to share with you and everybody that I am, in fact, a lawyer. I became not content to sit in the front row of the courtroom. I wanted to represent some of the people myself and make some of the arguments, because I'm going in there to advocate for my clients. So I don't care if you're mad at me, we're not golfing, not drinking buddies. I'm there to get my innocent clients out. So I could care less if you're unhappy with me. So other lawyers, some of them are not, a lot of them are not going to do that. So I'm fine with that. So that's why I got, plus the extra credential furthers the policy work. And so
it's innocent.
Sure. So we know what the causes of wrongful conviction are, false confession, misidentification, lying informants, bad lawyers.
Right,
so those have patterns. There are patterns
Right.
You look for the patterns that are
matching.
available in cases that have ended in DNA exonerations, and you compare that to the case that you're looking at, and you ask yourself 2 questions. Is this claim of innocence at least possible? And number 2, do we see a potential way to win? And you have to say yes to both in order for us to take the case. Otherwise, there's no way to win. And to tie into a question earlier asked, part of my advocacy work, which I'll mention now, is actually I am welcomed into some law enforcement circles. So I served on the transition team for the new Westchester District Attorney that I helped to elect as an individual advocate, writing a memo. This is how your conviction review unit should look like. For the last 7 years, I've co-taught the ethics for the new police cadets. And I've spoken in front of groups of prosecutors. And I do that through this, right? Is look,
Wow.
wrongful conviction and justice reform as about justice and accuracy, not anti-cop, not anti-prosecutor. Definitely anti-cop, definitely anti-prosecutor when you're breaking the law and doing illegal things.
Right, of course.
But if you're doing your job right, I got no issue. And at the same time, I stay true to my conviction. So I always explicitly say, look, it's not a few bad apples. Okay, stop saying that, because it's damn near 3,000 wrongful conviction cases from 1989
Right,
to
right.
now, per the and then all this police brutality and
system.
then deadly.
3,000
So it's not
that
bad a few,
The system.
but they accept that message. But they accept that. The point is
Of
they
course.
accept that
3,000
message.
3,000 have been exonerated.
Close
There
to
are
that.
many that are
Yes,
still
That haven't been
rotting away.
exonerated.
yes, exactly.
They're still rotting in prison.
Have
Right.
attitudes in the public towards the possibility of wrongful conviction, have they
Yes.
evolved? Is the zeitgeist moving in the right direction?
It is. I believe that each person that's exonerated makes it a little bit easier for the next person to make it out, because the judges now, and they're taking this education and along with the public, I think they're more willing to seriously consider an actual innocence claim or newly discovered in light of tying into this that Sid makes in the chat, where he says he's told that many innocent people plead guilty because they're scared/threatened by harsher sentences if they plead innocence and are found guilty. So that's called a trial penalty, by the way. In legal circles and in the innocence movement, that's called the trial penalty, where you can plead guilty and get 5 years. You do a 5 to 15, or you can, if you blow trial, you're going to get 25. You could get 25 to life. So yeah, a lot of people that are innocent do plead guilty for that, and it's been estimated. There was a judge that estimated that he thought that the percentage of falsely accused defendants that were taking guilty pleas, even though they were factually innocent, was at 10%.
Who among all the people of all of your work that you've been involved with, who is the one person whose exoneration was most powerful or moved you the most?
Definitely the first person. That was William Lopez. So Bill had did 23 and a half years on a shotgun murder in Brooklyn. His case leapt off the pages for us because it started out as a 2-witness case, but then one of those witnesses could not identify him in court. So now it becomes a 1-witness case. That one witness had did 12 vials of, I forgot if it was crack or cocaine. She had been up for 24 hours, and she claimed that she did not have a deal, that she was just testifying because it was the right thing to do. But one day after he was convicted, she miraculously came walking out of jail on her case, and his defense attorney talked him out of calling his alibi witnesses, his 2 alibi witnesses as witnesses. The initial description was a pair of dark-skinned 6'1", 6'2" Panamanians. Bill was a 5'7" light-skinned Puerto Rican, weighing 100 pounds less than what witnesses estimated him to. So, he had a pre-existing legal team that had been with him for 10 years. We came in, did some investigative work, helped uncover some additional evidence. It was kind of like a building was built that was missing a section, and we put that in. So he was exonerated after 23 and a half years. So it sticks out because that was the first exoneration we helped. But tragically, Bill lived for like a year and a half after being exonerated. So he did 23 and a half years, most of it in the law library. And after, struggling to only ultimately live for like a year and a half out here in society. So it sticks out to me that way.
Angie, one of our friends and frequent guests, she writes along with what you were just saying, Jeff. She writes, and I quote, "I pled guilty so many times just to get the chance to get away from those that were accusing me. It's insane." She says, "I pled guilty to a felony just to get out of CRDF. COVID-19 got me kicked, released a few weeks after I pled out." So, here's a case of someone who was just doing anything she possibly could to improve her situation, including admitting to things that weren't, So
Right. That's common because I mean, you're locked up. You can plead guilty and go home, or you can keep fighting the case and you stay in prison. Remember, your apartment, your car, your property, that's all likely to be gone. You might have kids. You face the trial penalty. You have a public defender that has you and 99 other clients. That they're in general, they're really not the most skilled lawyers of them all anyway. So a lot of people, just to minimize, and then on top of that, the mistreatment that you experience fighting your case from the street versus fighting it from on the inside. I remember when I was in the county jail, they wake you up around 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, right? They put you in the bullpen with it's way too many people. It's hot. You're a sweaty mess. They put you in handcuffs. You're on like a chain gang. Your legs are together. Your arms are together. They throw you in the back of the van where there's again no adequate ventilation.
Ventilation, yeah.
And then you're downstairs in a holding area in the courthouse for hours and hours and hours just to make a short appearance that lasts 5 minutes, and you go back downstairs and you're there again for hours and hours and hours and hours. And every time they make an extension, 30 days, yeah, we'll come back in 60 days, 90 days, 4 months from Your Honor, we need an extension. We need another 90 days. We need 6 months. People aren't ready, Your Honor. We need this, we need that. And every one of those extensions is at the defendant's expense. You're going to have to go back to jail, stay there, and then there's going to be another trip that you're going to encounter. So just to get out of that alone, people plead guilty.
Good point, man.
You want to do that? You want to just go home?
all right, Jeff, what's next for you?
Sure. So, well, definitely. So I've entered some of the 10 cases that. So they're not the 11 people got home. There's 10 active cases now. So I've entered some of those cases as a co-counsel. So definitely to exonerate some people as an attorney. So there's that. I'm doing policy work myself and fellow advocates. We're doing policy work now in New York, Pennsylvania, and California. So in Pennsylvania, that's one of 14 states that does not have compensation. So you could be wrongfully convicted and exonerated, and the state currently says they owe you nothing. So we're working on that and the oversight for prosecutors. We did get the oversight for prosecutors passed in New York. We're trying to get rid of the exceptions when it comes to videotaping interrogations. In California, we want the oversight for the prosecutors. We're trying to kill the death penalty there because of the obvious risk of executing someone innocent, amongst many other objections that I'm not going to get into now, just to keep it short. But so there's the policy goals, exonerating others as an attorney. I'm looking to increase my profile. At some point, I really would like, when I speak or say something, to have a bigger platform, just like a lot of the other civil rights people did, who went before us on whose shoulders we stand. So I'm hoping that that's going to happen at some point. My book, at some point, a movie, and have
Netflix.
an office, have a chapter of the foundation in each state and in each country, because I look at wrongful conviction as being a worldwide issue.
Epidemic, man.
So that, and maybe the last thing is, maybe 7 years from now, maybe I make the transition from being an advocate and working in a nonprofit sphere. Maybe I make the jump from that to politics, so I can go from trying to persuade people to do the right thing to having my hands directly on the levers of power, change laws, and effectuate change. So that is a possibility for me in the future.
You got my vote, man.
We had a lot of great guests on the yard, man. But yo, for me, man, you're one of the top ones, my man. Salute you, man.
Yeah.
That's what's up, man.
Salute you, baby.
You got my vote too, for sure.
We are really proud and very appreciative and humbled that we have the opportunity here for you to share your experiences and your heart and your soul and your intelligence and your history and what you've learned and what lies ahead. It's really just, amazing. And you are, I say this every time, every one of our guests, rather than getting the hell out of prison and never wanting to look back, they always look back and they always come back and they always feel a debt of obligation to their brothers and sisters who are going through it, and you are just, you're another one. And, there's a special place in heaven for guys like you, for sure.
Absolutely.
Thank
If
you. I'd like to close. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
you want to say something, I'm about to wrap it
I
up.
just,
Go ahead.
yeah, all right, I'll take 30. I want to give some practical advice to anybody listening, that first of all, if you committed the crime, listen, the criminal justice reform, mass incarceration, rehabilitation, that's sweeping the country. Position yourself so that you can make the board. When they change sentencing laws, you go to the parole board. Position yourself. You're in the best possible position to make it. Take all the programs you can, better yourself, stay out the prison politics, minimize the trouble you're in. You can't wait till the changes are made, and that's when you try to become a model prisoner. So I want to give that. Okay, and if you find yourself wrongfully imprisoned, look, you got to put together a nice and short, nice and tight letter. It can be no more than 2 paragraphs. My name is so and so, and I was wrongfully convicted of. Mention the charges, mention the sentence, mention what the evidence is against you, and then point out what's flawed in the evidence. Then you want to mention any directions that there are possibly to go in, point out the top 3 facts that are in the record now that suggest you're innocent. Look, the reason I am writing you is because I'm looking for someone to help exonerate me, but neither I nor my family have any funds to hire an investigator or a lawyer. I can prove what I'm saying in the letter by sending you documents, but I'm respecting your time right now, and I'll wait for you to get back to me. That's what it's supposed to say. That's what it's supposed to look like. The more you write, the more likely it's going to end up in the trash. Do not send any unsolicited documents. A lot of guys think, let me just write a lot. Let me send everything. You're going to run people away. Keep it nice and tight and short like that. And if you do it like that, then you maximize your chance of catching lightning in the bottle, because that's what this is. But once in a while, lightning strikes, and I'm free. So it could happen to me, and it can happen for you. Practical advice.
All right. Adrian put up Jeff's the URL to Jeff's foundation. It's up there right now, and I'm sure there's a way of contacting Jeff through that if you'd like to get in touch with him. We're very, very appreciative that you joined us, and we would certainly love to have you come back. Just
I'd
to
love that.
Hang
Yeah.
out, sit in the audience, kibitz
Sure.
a little bit, and join us. There's lots and lots of people who would love to hear more about you. And, you made fans out of a lot of people tonight. I just see it and I know it, including the 3 of us. Yeah. This is what we're all about. This is, exactly what people in prison and jail. Here's a case of a guy who never did anything, and he ended up that way. And ostensibly, if you looked at him, he's an animal, he's a terrible human being, or not even a human being for what he did. But it turns out he didn't even do it. There are plenty of people in prison who made stupid decisions. In my experience, it's rarely a question of morality. That's convenient, but it rarely applies. We're all human beings. We're flawed. We're not perfect. We've all screwed up. We've all had to ask for a second chance. We've all had one too many beers and gotten behind the wheel of a car. We've all cheated on our taxes. And, that's the difference between being incarcerated and not, there but for the grace of God. Please check out Commissary Club. Whether you have an iOS or an Android, you can download it. It's free. And the idea is that we just really expand the scale and reach more people who are connecting, people like Jeff, and people who aren't necessarily so articulate and who need desperately role models and inspiration. So please check that out and share that with others. And, at the bottom line, we've got to help each other.
Yeah.
We've got to help each other because God knows, and Jeff's life is a testament to that. They ain't going to do it for us. So please look after your brothers and sisters, do whatever you can, speak on their behalf when their case comes up, sign petitions, just get involved as much as you can. I can promise you it's going to be some very rewarding stuff you get involved with. Divine, you want to say something?
Yeah. And Jeff, before you go, I have two asks of you. One is please download the Commissary Club app, create a profile, and share some of your wisdom, your insight, your experience, your help inside our community. That's one. And tell friends and family and colleagues about it. And two, what can Commissary Club do for you, if anything?
Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
great point.
yeah, definitely. All right,
Okay,
so yeah, so look,
let's
so we
talk
have
about
a,
that. Let's talk about that offline. Okay, but we
Okay.
would love you to be part of our community actively, and we'd love to help spread your work and give you that larger
Mhm.
platform that you seek. Also, for everybody who's listening, there are lots of jobs now available, even if you have a record. Companies are hard pressed to fill positions, and out of that desperation, not because they're good guys, but because if they don't have people, it hurts their business. But companies large and small are finding it increasingly acceptable within certain limits to consider hiring folks with records. It turns out folks with records actually make great employees. Excuse me, and they stick around longer. So go to Commissary Club and check out jobs too. Thank you, Divine. Thank you, Seth.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you,
Everybody,
Jeff, Seth, Richard.
Yeah.
everybody
Yeah,
stay
great stuff, man.
healthy and see us next week. We can't wait to see you. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, guys. Powerful, Jeff. Thank you. We got to get you in office.